Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Daniel Esquivel, and I am in the Student Affairs Division here at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology as Student Success Specialist. And today I'm here to present on LGBTQ and the job search, part of Career Development Week here in on fall 2014. There'll be some time at the end for questions, but feel free to chat them in the chat box or to speak up on your phone or microphone, and we'll go ahead and answer that for you. So to get started, we want to just give some context for National Coming Out Day, which is every year on October 11th. So that would be this upcoming Saturday in 2014. And it's the 26th anniversary of National Coming Out Day. And it marks the anniversary of the National March on Washington for Lesbian and Gay Rights. Arguably one of the most basic tools is the power of coming out in terms of the LGBTQ community and communities. 1 out of every 2 Americans has someone close to them who might identify as gay or lesbian, and for transgender people that number is only 1 in 10. And all this information was taken from the Human Rights Campaign website. So to support our LGBT community here at the Chicago School and around the world, we wanted to make sure to talk a little bit about today the intricacies of being LGBT identified and what that looks like in the job search process. So a little bit about our agenda today. We'll talk a little bit about what LGBTQ means. We'll talk about expressing salient identities on a resume or CV as well as a cover letter. We'll talk a little bit about recognizing LGBT-friendly organizations. And then lastly, leave you with some job search resources for you to take advantage of moving forward in your career path. So just as a basic context, what is LGBTQ? There are a lot of acronyms thrown around and updated on a regular basis. We wanted to make sure that there was a platform and level of understanding moving forward in the presentation. So LGBTQ, that stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning. So I believe most folks are now pretty familiar with the different terms and what they mean. Q is noticeably interchangeable between queer and questioning. There are many more acronym letters that can be added. I've seen the letter I and A added on for intersex and allies as well. So just depending on the context of what you see it as, in the context of this presentation, I'll use LGBT and LGBTQ interchangeably, understanding that we are conventionally talking about the non-heterosexual populations within the community. So in terms of your resume and CV cover letter, how is it that we express our salient identities, whether that be an LGBT identity, a racial identity, religious identity, things like that. So while this is specifically about the LGBT population, there are a lot of parallels to different salient identities that someone might identify with. So you might be asking yourself, what should I include when talking about my salient identities? In the context of being LGBT, coming out is really a personal decision. There are many factors to consider when doing so. Some might find it an integral aspect of their own identity and would be troubled to exclude that from the job search process. Others might maintain or want to maintain that separation with their sexual orientation identity. So not necessarily a right or wrong answer with this one. It's really a personal decision and really knowing yourself and how to best represent yourself in the job search process. In terms of areas to consider, do consider, if you are a job applicant and you do not disclose any previous work or employment, volunteer work that is associated with the LGBT community, there might be some frustration of hiding your identity. So know for yourself whether or not you feel if it's important to leave that portion out of your job search process as well as your job search documents, and kind of weigh the pros and cons of knowing yourself and what that frustration might look like for you moving forward if you do choose to not share that information with other folks, if that makes sense. Kind of conversely, the flip side of that is knowing if, for yourself, if you know that your salient identity is something that should be at the forefront based on your work and personal and professional experiences, do you consider potential discrimination, harassment of being out. It is an unfortunate reality that many minority communities live with, no matter what identity you're bringing to the table. So while there are many laws and regulations in place at organizations, statewide and federal, there is potential discrimination of being out. So things to be mindful of and to consider when applying for jobs. And to that end, it might look different at each job you apply to. So one job you might find at an organization that has a bit more open policies and procedures in place for LGBT folks. You might be more inclined to be a bit more open when applying there, but conversely, a different company might not have the same expectations and policies. So things to consider. Kind of follow up to that is consider your audience and how out you want to be when applying to certain organizations or positions. So again, you know yourself best and can kind of differentiate between different organizations that might be more or less open to you being open with your own identity. And as you saw on the agenda, there will be an area moving forward in the presentation on how to identify those LGBT-friendly organizations. So let's talk a little bit about experiences. So there are advantages to disclosing your LGBTQ identities or ally identity for that matter for specific positions. So if you're applying to a practicum or internship where you'll be working at a local LGBT center, it would be beneficial for you to disclose a salient LGBT identity to identify with clients, terminology, the community population. So in that particular case, definitely would be an advantage. And that's very true for any other salient identities. I've worked specifically with students who are military veterans working and applying at veteran centers where that could definitely play up as an advantage to them knowing the lingo and having those shared experiences. So in this particular case, if you are looking at an organization that is either an LGBT organization or LGBT friendly, it can be to the applicant's advantage to disclose that information. But what it comes down to, no matter what your identities are, it really is the skills you develop from participating in diverse experiences that make you most marketable. So there are a few there on the screen, but very generally speaking, those term applicable skills, we can talk a little bit about communication. So no matter, again, what identities you bring to the table, these are going to be those transferable skills that are applicable. So if you're applying, say, to an LGBT organization, but most of your experience is at a multicultural center working with racial minorities, while the two are a little bit different in terms of the populations they serve, there are those parallels and similarities, and these applicable skills can help bridge those gaps. So talking a little bit about communication, leadership is another great transferable skill that is applicable no matter where you're working. You can talk about project management. So if you've been at an organization that you've handled projects or events that might be applicable to the job you're applying to and how working with those diverse populations further your professional development. Collaboration is another thing. Whether you're working individually at home, working from home, chances are you will be working with other people, working on teams with various colleagues. So talking a little bit about collaboration and your experience working with a variety of people is definitely going to be to your benefit. And kind of a follow-up to that is working with diverse clients and populations. So again, even if we're not specifically talking about an LGBTQ context, there are a lot of different groups and organizations that have those parallels that can be brought up. So even if you're, say you find a job that you really want to work at an Islamic center, maybe around your institution or around your city, but primarily most of your work is in the context of LGBT or working at a, like I said, a multicultural center. It's about drawing those parallels, working with diverse clients. So while they might not fit the exact mold of what the organization is looking for, you're able to draw from the applicable skills and experiences. It is important to also conduct research on organizations prior to writing your resume and CV. We do always encourage, I know my career service colleagues mentioned that, you have to do your research in this day and age when putting together your resume or CV and cover letter for that matter. it does do the applicant a great benefit when they're able to customize their resume and CV cover letter to really tailor what that organization is looking for. So if you do find yourself that you might not have as much direct applicable experience to a job that you're applying for, that's when, again, these skills that are applicable no matter what field you're in, you can really use from your own personal experiences to draw those important details to make you a more suitable candidate for the position you're applying for. In terms of your level of openness, so we're talking here specifically about your previous experiences. So say, for example, you might have worked at an LGBT organization in your area, but the job you're applying for, you'd prefer not to put that on your CV or resume. So an example here is, if you have experience working at the LA Gay and Lesbian Center, gay and lesbian is in the title of the organization, so it's a bit challenging to separate that and not put that on your CV or resume. But one way to address that is, if you're, don't want to disclose that, is saying that you work for an anti-discrimination organization. So there are ways to tailor the information and focus on the poignant points related to anti-discrimination, social justice, things that are specific but broad enough that don't necessarily pinpoint a particular population, if that makes sense. If you are also concerned about your previous experience and how to facilitate explaining that on a CV or resume, you can also do what's called a functional resume. So rather than listing the name of the organization, a functional resume is used by grouping your accomplishments according to your skills versus naming the organization. So having bullet points of the applicable and transferable skills that you wish to convey on your resume, rather than listing every single organization that you've worked at that might have some sort of LGBT connotation. So that's another way to combat that if you are concerned about how open to be in terms of your previous experience. I always encourage students to be open and honest with themselves and what they're looking for. Of course, understanding that folks have a different level of comfort and openness when it comes to LGBTQ identities. Again, the common thread here throughout the entire presentation, which I'm sure I'll say again, is we really just have to know yourself and your own level of openness. So speaking from my own experiences, I know that this can ebb and flow depending on the organization, depending on where you're at personally and professionally. So I think it's important to know yourself, know where you're at with certain identities and understanding of yourself. And from there, you can move forward with how to best represent yourself in the job search process. The next area is recognizing LGBT-friendly organizations and really seeing if the values of the company you're applying to match your own values. So I basically went online and searched pride and organizations to see what popped up, and these were just a handful of some of the organizations that popped up. So you'll see on the left there that there's a picture from the San Francisco LGBT Pride Parade, and founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, was there and participated, as well as thousands of other Facebook employees. There's American Airlines, Starbucks, Apple, and Google famously posted that logo during the Winter Olympics in Russia recently. So again, there is a lot of visibility amongst many organizations now, both in and out of psychology, to take a look at that are much more attuned to LGBT needs and what being an LGBT-friendly organization really means. So in terms of assessing your employers and how to see how LGBT-friendly they really are, first and foremost, not unlike any other organization, you would want to check their website. So see what initiatives they have in place to support both the LGBT populations and any other salient identity or population that you ascribe to. See what support systems there are. Oftentimes, HR might offer different mentoring initiatives depending on the organization and how you can go about being connected with another identified employee or another colleague that can best support you in a mentoring role. Look a little bit into EEO and the hiring processes. So what those whether state, federal laws look like in terms of employment, and if certain classes are protected underneath that. Also look at benefits. So this is also definitely a hot button issue for a lot of folks in the LGBT community. I would say particularly in the trans community in terms of health insurance, but do look if there are benefits for domestic partnerships. I do know that a majority of our states now do have same-sex marriage. Others might not. So look what domestic partnership benefits look like, if that is of importance to you, as well as health insurance benefits, which can be particularly a challenging area to navigate as a trans person. So do take a look at that in terms of assessing your employers. The next thing would be to check other databases. So one great database to look at is Glassdoor, and Glassdoor.com is essentially a website where you can go on, type in an organization, and I believe either current or former employees really give a rating and assessment of what it's like to actually work at an organization. So you can look up to see if any other LGBT identified persons have written anything related to that context of their identity to see if that would be a good match for yourself. The Human Rights Campaign also operates a corporate equality database that lists a lot of different organizations that do have these policies and procedures in place to support the LGBT community. And we will make sure to leave you with some at the end of this presentation. Again, it is really important to do your own research. So one very simple example is in doing your internet searches, using whatever search engine you choose, searching the name of the organization you might be interested in, as well as discrimination. So see if any news articles pop up. Sometimes we only hear about an organization because of the bad press that they have. Sometimes it goes under the radar. So it's oftentimes the instances where there might not be a lot of press on it, especially related to the LGBTQ population. Oftentimes LGBTQ can be brushed under the rug in terms of the media, other times it's not. So it's important for yourself to do the research and see if you are really interested in an organization that you think would be beneficial for you in terms of your employment. See if there's any red flags, so to speak, that you might come up against. And really also check where the information is coming from. Make sure it's coming from a reliable source, a reliable news outlet, things like that. Lastly, here is to assess during the application process. So, while there are thankfully a lot of organizations out there that are considered LGBT friendly, applying for an organization that is as a whole LGBT friendly, like a large organization, national, international organization, while the organization itself might be LGBT friendly, perhaps that particular office or location that you're applying to might not have as much of an open lens as the institution or organization as a whole, if that makes sense. So in terms of assessing the application process, look over the application materials and disclosures to see if anything comes up for you there. Ask about diversity initiatives, whether that be volunteer work, pride events. I know here at the Chicago School, when I applied, I asked that question and was happy to know that the Chicago School participates in LGBT pride parades, volunteer work, things like that. So the other thing to mention there is if you are in the application interview process, things to consider whenever you are in any interview is different ideas for the future. So if you're doing your research on the organization to know that their mission, their values, different past events or projects that they've worked on, it is beneficial to already come to the table with a few feasible ideas that might help benefit your organization, the clientele they serve, things like that. Also look at their publication materials. A lot of organizations now do advertise in LGBT media and mainstream media, for that matter, to portray equal rights in terms of what the population served looks like. Just for an example, I was reading a magazine last week, and there was an ad for the space company Northrop Grumman, and they had an LGBT ad with 2 men, 2 women, and a family. So there are a lot more visible publications and materials that do support the LGBT community. And again, it's really up to you to assess whether or not you feel that will hold true for the organization that you're applying to. In terms of rights in the workplace, it is important to know as an LGBT identified person what rights and responsibilities you have as well as the organization has. So here are just a few, just a handful really, of organizations that can better guide you in terms of LGBT rights, some of which include the Human Rights Campaign, which is probably the most visible in the United States, Lambda Legal, as well as Pride at Work. So a lot of different resources for you to really take a look at what rights you have as an LGBT person in the hiring and in the hiring process and while an employee at a particular organization. I also wanted to make sure to include trans resources since the trans community particularly has different concerns and challenges to face in the workplace. So in terms of a few websites to take a look at, the National Center for Gender Equality, Transgender at Work, Law Center, and Law and Policy Institute are all great resources to look up more trans law and resources to support that population. There's also some great publications, including the complete guide to transgender in the workplace. So if you do work in HR or do work at an organization where you feel that your organization can be a bit more trans-friendly and inclusive, there are a lot of good resources in terms of books and articles that are out there to support that community and really help you think critically about how to think holistically about how to support your employees. So, for example, does your organization have gender-neutral bathrooms? Does your organization have, in terms of literature, is it using gendered pronouns like he and her? And and really take a critical look at how inclusive that is and how that can be detrimental, essentially, to a workplace and work morale. So we want to leave you, of course, with some job resources for LGBTQ-related careers. So in terms of some job search tools, there are a lot of them. These are just a few that I found to be very helpful. An Equal Career link, as well as Out for Work, Pro-Gay Jobs, Simply Hired also has a GLBT-friendly job search function while looking on their job site, as well as the Transgender Job Bank. So also important, again, for those that might be allies to the LGBTQ community, it might be really important for you to, even if you don't personally identify as LGBTQ, that you are applying and supporting organizations that do have a greater level of understanding and support for this population. So different platforms to consider in terms of applying for jobs. I haven't used each of them individually to see what it looks like in terms of the field of psychology and behavioral health sciences, but I do know that there are tons of organizations listed on here purposefully to ensure that there's information out there as to where to apply to that's LGBT friendly. In terms of local and career-specific resources, I wanted to pull from our 3 different geographic areas for the Chicago School, and there are a lot of resources, thankfully, as we are in larger metropolitan areas. So there's some resources there for Southern California, including the LA LGBT Center, as well as the Center OC for those in Orange County. There's several organizations in Chicago, including the Center on Halsted, Introspectum Counseling, as well as Women Care Counseling Center. And for Washington, D.C., headquarters of the Human Rights Campaign is located there, as well as some the D.C. Center, some transgender health empowerment, and LGBT counseling. In terms of on-campus resources, we want to make sure, at least speaking from the Student Affairs Division as well as Career Services, that there are opportunities for students to feel included and encouraged to participate in the community, as well as looking for careers in their chosen field. So in terms of career services, we do offer these job search strategies, resume cover letter review, and interviewing. So if you are interested to schedule an appointment with a career services advisor, you would email them at careerservices@thechicagoschool.edu or call us on the student resource line, which is listed there. It's the 800-684-2890 option, and you'll, option 4 will be for career services. And as best you feel comfortable, do disclose with your career service advisor if it is important to you to disclose your LGBT identity. If you have work experience working with that particular population, or working, in a variety of ways, do connect with them to see how to best represent yourself, as they are the experts in what they do. Another area of student affairs is our student development team. They offer safe zone training for students, faculty, and staff throughout the year. And the safe zone training is to be a safe zone ally. It's essentially a visual campaign on our Chicago school campuses to show support for the LGBT community and know that there are safe spaces and zones on our campuses for faculty, staff, and students who have gone through the training and wish to present themselves as a safe zone ally. So if you'd like more information about when you are able to participate in the next Safe Zone training, you can email multicultural@thechicagoschool.edu or give us a call at 800-684-2890, and it's option 6. So that's all I have for you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that might be out there. Again, if you have any questions that come up for you later on, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is support@thechicagoschool.edu, or feel free to call me on the 800 number as well. My option is 8 on the phone. Anytime I'm at my desk as well, you can connect with me via Skype at tcspp.support. If there aren't any questions out there, I thank you so much for joining me. And again, if you have any questions about navigating the job search process as an LGBT identified person, connect with myself or Career Services. Thanks so much.